Here is a number worth sitting with: 47. That is how many times the average person replays a painful memory in a single day. Not once, 47 times. And research suggests 3 hidden patterns drive almost all of it: craving what is gone, pushing away what is here, and mistaking that restless loop for thinking. See those 3 clearly, and something unexpected happens. The suffering doesn't disappear, but it loosens. Today I want to show you all 3, through a teaching so old it has been tested by millions of lives, because understanding, the Buddha discovered, is not a struggle. About 2,500 years ago, on the outskirts of a town called Varanasi in central India, there was a place known as the Deer Park. Trees swayed gently in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, deer grazed quietly in the grass. The forest held a deep, unhurried stillness. The light was fading, that soft amber hour just before evening, and it filtered down through the leaves in shifting patches of shadow and gold. Into this quiet place came a lone figure. He looked as though he had traveled a very long way to get here. His robes were dusty from the road, but his eyes held something unusual, a stillness that went deeper than the forest around him. Already waiting in the clearing were 5 men. When they spotted the approaching figure from a distance, they leaned toward one another and whispered. In that moment, a question was about to be spoken aloud for the very first time. What is suffering, and where does it actually come from? I'd like to walk with you through the night that question was finally answered. The 5 men had known this figure before, had once sat beside him, eaten beside him, practiced beside him through years of fierce and unrelenting austerity. They had watched him starve himself to near nothing, had seen him hold his breath until his body shook, had admired what they took to be his iron will. But then one day he had simply stopped, had accepted a bowl of rice from a young girl by the river, and they had turned their backs on him in disgust, certain he had given up. Now here he was again, walking toward them across the grass, and something about the way he moved made the whispers die on their lips. The figure who arrived at the Deer Park that evening was Gautama Siddhartha, the man who would come to be known as the Buddha. Not long before, he had sat beneath a fig tree in deep meditation, and after a long and exhausting search, something had opened up inside him. He had found the answer he'd been looking for, and now he had come to share it for the very first time with others. The 5 men waiting there had once been his companions in spiritual practice, but they had left him. The reason was this: in those days, the prevailing belief was that if you wanted to escape suffering, you had to push your body to its absolute limits. Fasting, deprivation, extreme physical hardship. The 5 men believed in this path completely. So when Gautama had accepted a bowl of rice porridge from a kind stranger and eaten it, they were disgusted. He's given up, they said to one another. He's gone soft. He's abandoned the path. And so they had walked away from him and continued their austerities on their own. That's why when they spotted Gautama approaching through the trees of the Deer Park, their first instinct was coldness. We won't greet him, they agreed quietly. We won't offer him a seat. We won't show him any respect. But something strange happened as he drew closer. The way he moved, the quality of his expression, something in the depth of his eyes. It was completely different from the man they had known. Without quite deciding to, one of the 5 found himself standing up and preparing a place to sit. Another moved to bring water for washing his feet. By the time Gautama sat down, all 5 of them had gathered around him, almost without knowing why. He spoke quietly. There are 2 extremes, he began. One is losing yourself entirely in pleasure, chasing comfort and sensation at all costs. The other is punishing your body in the belief that pain itself leads to freedom. Neither of these is the true path. The 5 men listened. Now, suffering, he paused. Suffering is real. Being born is suffering. Growing old is suffering. Illness is suffering. Death is suffering. Being separated from those we love, that is suffering. Being bound to those we would rather avoid, that is suffering. Wanting something and not getting it, that too is suffering. Something stirred in the 5 men. These words were landing somewhere real inside them. And where does this suffering come from? Gautama continued. He was quiet for a moment, It comes from craving, the thirst for pleasure, the thirst to keep existing, and the thirst sometimes to disappear entirely. This craving, this thirst, is the root beneath all suffering. One of the 5 men spoke before he could stop himself. Then how do we end the thirst? Gautama answered gently, there is a way, but it does not lie in running from one extreme to the other. Walk that middle path with me. That night the 5 men received his words. This was the Buddha's first teaching, what tradition calls the first turning of the wheel. In the fading light of the deer park, the structure of suffering was given language for the very first time. And one of the 5, a man named Kandanya, understood it so completely that Gautama stopped mid-sentence, looked at him, and simply said, "You know it, don't you?" It was not a question. Later that same night, beneath a sky full of stars, Kandanya would become the first person in history to see what the Buddha had seen. At the heart of what the Buddha said that night in the deer park is something that can be put simply. Suffering has a cause. And that cause is not something out there in the world. It lives in the movement of a mind that keeps reaching, clinging, demanding. This is the part that matters most. When we're hurting, most of us do the same thing. We look outward. I'm suffering because of what that person did. I'm suffering because I don't have enough. I'm suffering because things aren't going my way. But the Buddha didn't point outside. He pointed inward. You're not in pain because something is missing from your life. You're in pain because you've decided, somewhere below the surface, that things should be a certain way. And when reality doesn't match that picture, it hurts. Think about what happens when someone betrays your trust. The pain is real. Please don't misunderstand, I'm not dismissing it. But look just beneath the pain. What's there? They should never have done that to me. They were supposed to treat me with care. There's a silent assumption underneath. And when that assumption shatters, the pain floods in. The suffering isn't caused by the betrayal itself. It's caused by the collision between a fixed belief, this could never happen, and the reality that it did. That's what the Buddha meant by craving, by thirst. We grip something tightly, a belief, an expectation, a version of how things should be. The harder we grip, the more it hurts when reality slips through our fingers. The pain isn't in the world, it's in the grip. Now here's something worth sitting with for a moment. When we say I am suffering, we imagine a solid, stable I that owns the suffering, like it belongs to us, like we are carrying a fixed object called pain. But is that I actually as solid as it feels? The Buddha saw the self not as a fixed thing but as a temporary gathering of body, sensation, memory, intention, and perception arising together under certain conditions. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago. Something that once broke you may no longer touch you at all. Maybe suffering isn't something you possess. Maybe it's something that arises when certain conditions come together and changes when those conditions shift. One more thing about letting go, because it's often misunderstood. Straining to let go is itself a form of clinging. As long as you are forcing yourself to release something, you are still tightly aware of the fact that you haven't. What the Buddha offered at the deer park wasn't a command to drop everything. It was a quiet invitation. Let's look together at where the thirst is coming from. When you truly see it, your hand sometimes loosens on its own, not because you forced it, just because you finally saw what you were holding. And that seeing, not the straining, not the effort, but the clear, undefended looking, is itself the beginning of relief. A monk once described it this way. He had spent years trying to forgive someone, wrestling with it, repeating the words like medicine he was forcing down. Then one afternoon, sitting by a window with nowhere to be, he simply watched the anger rise and pass like weather, and realized he had never needed to conquer it, only to stop mistaking it for himself. The hand opened, not because he had finally won, because he had finally looked. So what does this actually look like in everyday life? Let's bring it close. First, when work won't go the way you hoped. You've given everything to your job. Long hours, real effort, years of showing up, but the results aren't coming. Your manager doesn't seem to notice. A colleague got the promotion you were quietly counting on. You feel left behind. The pain is real, but listen for what's underneath it. After everything I've put in, I deserve to be recognized. That level of effort should get results. That word, should, is worth noticing. Where did it come from? Some mix of past experiences, things you were told, the unspoken rules of the environment you grew up in. A should, assembled over time, now running quietly. When that should comes up against a reality that doesn't cooperate, the present always looks like it's falling short. This isn't to say effort is meaningless. It isn't to say recognition doesn't matter. It's simply asking, what exactly are you gripping? And where did that grip come from? When someone close to you keeps hurting you, a friend or family member says something that stings, and the pain lingers, they just don't understand me. The craving underneath this is the need to be understood, and that need is completely natural. But when it becomes they must understand me, when any gap in that understanding lands like a wound, the other person is often just living their own life, unaware of the weight you've placed on them. Try asking yourself gently, where does this hunger to be understood come from? Sometimes it reaches back a long way, to a child who needed to be seen and wasn't. And now, without quite meaning to, you're asking one person in the present to fill a space that's been empty for a very long time. Third, when aging frightens you, your body doesn't do what it once did, memory slips, things that used to come easily now take effort. The grief in this is real. But look at the belief underneath. I shouldn't have to get old. I should still be who I was. You were never a fixed thing. You've been changing, quietly, constantly, since you were born. So have I. So has everyone. It isn't change itself that hurts. It's the belief that you were supposed to stay the same. All three of these share one pattern. When we grip a fixed idea of how things should be, reality becomes a source of constant pain. The Buddha said, when the way you see things shifts, the world you see shifts too. Before you try to change your behavior, before you push or pull or fix anything, just notice what you're holding on to. That noticing, all by itself, is where something starts to move. A monk was once asked how long it takes to become free. He didn't answer with years or practices. He simply picked up his walking stick, held it out, and opened his hand. There's just one thing I'd like to invite you to try today. Give a name to what you're gripping. When the 5 men at the deer park first heard the Buddha speak, they didn't do anything dramatic. They didn't immediately transform. They didn't let go of everything at once. All they did was listen. These men who had been planning to ignore him, they found themselves turning toward him instead. And that turning, that willingness to face what they'd been avoiding, that was the beginning. You can start in exactly the same way. The next time something hurts, when you feel anger rising, or sadness settling in, or anxiety quietly tightening, stop for just a moment. Find a little stillness. And ask yourself, what do I believe right now that things should be? If you're angry, somewhere beneath it there's probably, this shouldn't have happened. If you're sad, maybe, things should have turned out differently. If you're anxious, perhaps things have to go a certain way, or else. When you find it, don't try to argue with it. Don't force yourself to release it. Just let yourself see it clearly. Ah, this is what I've been holding. That's enough. You don't have to let go. You don't have to fix anything or change anything through sheer willpower. Just notice. The path the Buddha pointed to begins with awareness, not with effort. I won't promise that this will dissolve your suffering. That would be too easy an answer. But the way you see things may begin to shift, little by little. Slowly, honestly, that quiet shift, that's the humble doorway into this practice. A monk once described it this way. He had carried resentment toward his teacher for years. Like a stone in his pocket, he'd forgotten was there. Until the day he simply reached in and felt its weight. He didn't throw it away that afternoon. But for the first time, he knew what he was carrying. And knowing, he said, was itself a kind of rest. What is it that you're holding most tightly right now? Is it an expectation you have of someone else? Is it a version of yourself from the past? Someone you used to be and feel you've lost? Or maybe it's an image of who you think you should be. A picture you're carrying in your mind that you keep measuring yourself against. You don't have to answer right now. Just let the question stay with you tonight. Sit with it gently, without needing to resolve it. That's enough. There was a monk who spent years trying to remember the exact sound of his mother's voice. gripping the memory so hard it began to change shape in his hands. One evening he simply stopped trying, and in the silence that followed, he heard something closer to her than any memory had ever been. The structure we explored today, how attachment binds us to suffering, rests on a teaching we covered in a previous episode, that suffering always has an origin, and that origin can be understood. You'll find that teaching linked in the description below. That night in the deer park, the 5 men didn't let go of anything. They simply listened to one person speak, that's all. And in those words, quiet, unhurried, honest, they heard one thing clearly: suffering has a cause. This teaching doesn't ask you to stop feeling. Joy, sadness, anger, grief, all of it belongs to a human life. The Buddha didn't push any of it away. Suffering exists, he said first. He didn't argue with that truth. Then, gently, the shape of your suffering may be something you can change. Not a guarantee, just a possibility. If you stayed with me this far, I want to leave you with one thing. You don't have to blame yourself for hurting. If you are holding on tightly to something, it's because that something matters deeply to you. That grip comes from love, from longing, from caring. But if your hands are tired, if they ache from holding on so long, please let yourself notice that, just that. You don't have to surrender anything. You don't have to give up. Sometimes, just seeing what you're carrying is enough to let the hands rest a little. The wind that moved through the deer park that evening is still blowing, quiet and steady somewhere. Thank you so much for being here today. It has traveled across rivers and mountains and centuries, and somehow it has found its way here, into this room, into this moment, into whatever you carried through the door today. That is not a small thing. Pause. Whose face came to mind while you were listening today? One story a day. In a week, your words will change. In a month, your eyes will change. In a year, the same world will look completely different.